Like, I really think that the way that they've designed Qorvex now, kind of sets a bad precedent. Like, I mean, it was already something that was there before, but Qorvex is kind of one of the worst offenders. Like, on the surface, you wouldn't think it, but, like, Qorvex's kit is kind of dog shit. And the only thing holding it together is the single augment mod that should honestly just be in the base kit. And even then, the augment mod shouldn't be the only thing holding his kit together. Like, or what the augment mod is doing. Because it kind of invalidates, like, two of his other three abilities. Like, you could argue that Pillar gets used because it has that, that sort of turrety effect where if you shoot it with your 4, it kind of, it pulses it with the, explosions. The popcorn effect, we'll call it. And that's fine, that's, like, okay ability synergy, but, like, Wrecking Wall is completely useless because, 1, you can't cast it while you're in your 4. 2, you need a secondary augment to make it viable. Which is just terrible because you can just subsume Opamim eyes onto him, drop out of your 4 every little while to recast it, and then you're good. Because you're already kind of staring at enemies for a hot second anyway, so Opamim eyes has a perfect amount of time to do its job. And then his 3 might be, honestly, one of the worst defensive abilities I have seen in a long time. The reason being is that its entire solitary purpose is to make you immune from status effects. Why does he need that? Why does it not do anything else besides, like, randomly inflict radiation? I don't know, but it kind of bothers me. Like, I got blasted by a couple of people for saying this, but, like, it's an actually dog shit ability. Like, status immunity is honestly something that's really easy to come by at this point. So why is, when he was designed very recently, mind you, I should say very recently loosely, because he's well over a year old at this point, I'm pretty sure. God, that makes me feel old. But when he came out, like, status immunity was very easy to come by. Like, it's not that crazy of a defensive ability, at least not how it would be. So, okay, I guess I should context. Because he obviously didn't always have his augment. His augment took a while to come out. So for a long time, he was kind of stuck as this weird wannabe tank frame, but did not have any defensive abilities to make it work. Like, he just had really high armor and decent health, and, like, that was supposed to be enough. Yeah, like I said, we have a status immunity subsume from Helmet. Like, why is one of his abilities a bare bones Helmet default ability? Like, what is the purpose of that? Because when he came out, he didn't have his 4, and his 4 obviously makes him invincible, so that renders any form of other tanking kind of pointless, because he's almost constantly going to be sitting in that. But, moreover, like, when he didn't have this, status immunity was nowhere near enough, because he didn't really have the stats to quite make use of certain things. Like, Grace was okay. Grace was okay on him, but only to a point. And, like, he just didn't really have the health pool to abuse it properly. And now what we have is we have a Warframe who, his entire kit is almost entirely centralized around his 4. Like, the best thing you can possibly be doing is his 4, 90% of the time. Because it is, to its credit, an amazing room clearer, and it being a channeled ability should kind of be base kit. Because he was already struggling for mod space, but thankfully, because this one augment is so overloaded, he was able to cut a bunch of other mods that he doesn't really need anymore because of the fact that he kind of does it all with just this 4. And then he got a custom-made arcane from him in Arcane Universal Fallout that basically managed his entire energy economy for him. So he doesn't need anything for that either. So everything is just invested into his 4, and that's it. He's the 4 machine. Now, there is another Warframe that is like this in Frost. And, like, he has a couple things that he can do. He's a little bit more flexible than I, would say for, Qorvex. Because he has his augment to, you know, buff himself with cold damage, and he does have Snow Globe, which is useful, for defensive missions. But, like, most of his kit is revolving around Avalanche. And I think that can't be denied. I think he has this problem as well. He becomes kind of a one-button chump. And Qorvex also has this issue, and I'm afraid that a lot more Warframes going forward are going to kind of have this thing where, oh, well, we have the one good ability that lets us do the DPS, so that's all our kits are really going to be around, and then we're going to have, like, the 1 or 2 shitty abilities that get shoved into Helminth and don't really do much. Like, I'm afraid that instead of just fixing Warframes and what they do, they are just going to release augment mods for said Warframes. And once again, this is harkening back to the survival problem, where because all of our metrics are based on survival, it completely warps the perception of the game. Because, oh, the reason why a lot of Qorvex isn't seen as good because he can't hit that DPS rate. And, like, one of the real reasons he's not good is he wasn't, you know, didn't have any defensive abilities, because, again, his whatever these are just do fucking nothing for him. Like, Prime Sure-Footed is 50% of this ability. So, what gives, right? Like I said, again, granted, his augment, again, to the credit, the augment is very, very good. And I'm not saying that Qorvex is necessarily a bad frame, but he's kind of a gimmick, and it sets a bad precedent for the design of frames where, oh, we'll just release them half-assed, and then we'll fix them with an augment later to take a mod slot away from them. Like, I feel like that's almost intentional, where we're... Actually, to put it this way, back in the day, way back in the day, Warframes could only use their abilities if they had the mod for it. You had to mod your own abilities onto the Warframe, or else your Warframe wouldn't have that ability. We're almost regressing to that in some ways with augments, because there's a lot of abilities now that without their augment are fucking worthless. So we have literally gone backwards because of this issue, because of their refusal to just fix fucking abilities. I know this started as about Qorvex, but, like, let's talk about augments. Like, augments are interesting in a couple cases. Like, we have to take a look at a couple points where augments are, like, they are doing their designed purpose. Right? And they're not like, oh, this is the only reason you would ever use this ability is because of the augment. Like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like, one augment that is like this. I would say some of Nidus's augments are actually like this. Because Larva Burst, for example, right? Larva Burst, for example. Larva by itself is a perfectly good ability. It is a grouping ability. that is, you know, just well-designed, super basic, but strong, you know, gets everyone into a nice clump, very spammable, perfectly fine ability. Larva Burst gives you the option to turn that into a DPS ability. And I think that that is an example of a good augment, because the ability is fine by itself, but that augment just gives you something else to do with that ability. It changes the ability's function without rendering it completely useless if you do not have it. And so last time, we need a dead period to let devs fix up kits and augments. So many augments are banded fixes at this point where some frames are looking like mummies because of this. Yeah, no, exactly. Like, there really does need to be a great merging or some sort of larger fix. I have seen one really good suggestion where you have a Warframe as an augment slot within it, where you can have your one augment or an ability, but if you want more augments, you do have to put them on the base kit. And I think that is fair, because once you get to Helmet, then there is a little bit more of an argument against augments staying separate, because there's a couple crazy things that you can do with them. There are certain abilities where you can't stack damage abilities on top of each other. So, like, you can't have Eclipse and Roar on the same build. However, that does not apply, I believe, to things like Shock Trooper, where you can have Shock Trooper and Roar on the same build. That is fine. That is more than okay. That works. And I think at that point, when you are stacking damage buffs like that, then I think that there is a little bit more of an argument to keep, you know, augments separate from some abilities. But again, that only applies to Helmet. That's not talking about, you know, the general state of things. Again, like I said, I'm trying to think of more augments, and I'm really hard-pressed to think of ones that are genuinely, like, well-designed. Where either the ability is useless, or the augment, like, either the ability isn't useless, or the augment isn't useless. Where both are, like, aptly good. Like what is another good one like that? Like, I would say, actually, you know what? I would say Inaros' Scarab negation swarm is actually not terrible, because the ability by itself is status immunity and armor, and that's a perfectly good buff for him. More than I can say for Qorvex's. Because yes, it's status immunity, but it also gives him that extra armor, which is good. That does help him. So I would say that yes, that is a good augment, because the cheat death is nice, but he already has somewhat of a cheat death built into his kit, so it's not necessary. But it is something that would be, you know, a choice to make. Like, it's not the end of the world if you don't have it, but it is something that is nice to have, so you do have to make a choice on that. And that, again, an example of, like, a good augment, where it is an option select, if you will. What augments should be is, you can make this ability to do more at the cost of a mod slot, but abilities without their augments should not be useless, is kind of the problem. Mesa's Waltz is another one, actually, that I would say. Granted, a much more tamer augment, but I think that it does introduce, you know, again, like, some people don't use it. Some people don't like Mesa's Waltz, and that's perfectly okay. I think that that's more than fine. Like, if you're one to, you know, recast her 4 very often, then that works. You don't need it, but it is nice to have, and it fits in the Exilus slot, so that is fine. Like I said, would it be nice to have a base kit? Sure. But I do think that it is not the end of the world to not include, because like I said, it fits in the Exilus slot, so it's whatever. And I believe you are knockdown immune while you are in your 4, if memory serves. But don't quote me on that. But yeah, I mentioned Frost earlier, and he is actually another, you know, somebody else who suffers from that. Like, again, granted not as bad, because Avalanche is still a perfectly good ability by itself. It is a mass room armor strip with very decent damage and full CC. But the Overguard is a massive part of his survivability at that point. So I would say that it does absolutely need to be part of the kit. But again, he is kind of like a one-button miracle kid, where, like, 4 basically plays the game for him half the time. And, like, I will say, to play Devil's Advocate, 4 augments, right? 4 augments. Just so, like, there is 2 sides to this argument, I do want to make that clear. The precedent of merging augments with base kits does create a very high level of power creep, depending on how much you merge, because you have to look at it this way. If they start merging augments with base kits, you need to consider the fact that you need to consider the fact that, oh, if, you know, X, Y, and Z frame got their augments merged, why didn't mine? And then you have to look at it like, okay, well, do you merge all augments? I don't think that's feasibly possible, but, like, it now creates another level of power creep, which I'm not sure the game needs right now. Because we're already looking at a power creep issue, and merging augments does push that further. Granted, a lot of it is quality of life. That would just need to be fixed. Like, again, like, there's a lot of, like, ones that's, like, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But again, like I said, if some Warframe get it, you're gonna have all the people complaining, well, why didn't mine get that? So you really have to look at it from, like, a fairness perspective. It's like, how do you pick and choose which Warframes get what merged to their main kit? Like, how do you decide that? Let's fucking whatever. Just pick something. Also, have augments be a separate section for modding to save on slots and costs would be amazing. Have, like, I don't know, 3 open slots in a sub-menu, so that way you can actually test out augments without sacrificing other vital mods. Like I said, again, having a sub-mod space for it would be nice. But again, like I said, it is still pushing power creep. And, like, yes, I am fully on the side of, yes, make mods part of the base kit. 100%, do that. But there is a drawback to it. Not, like, it is maybe negligible, but it is a drawback. Nonetheless. That does need to be considered.